Hello everyone, welcome. Oh, where's my jewelry? 1 second. Much better. I felt really naked for a second. Anyways, welcome back to Timari's world, or welcome if you're new here. For today's video, I just wanted to go over my results from my autism test that I had done. I did an adult autism test back in February earlier this year. I just want to go through the results and like everything, like the process, I guess. My oldest sister was the first one to be like, I think you could have autism. And at first I was like, what are you talking about? I don't have autism. What are you talking about? I may be a little interested, but I don't think I have autism. But the more I looked into it and researched it, and I saw more TikToks and I saw more Instagram reels, and I was like, is this me? And it was one specific social outing, was like a graduation. I looked like at the DSM-5 after it, and I was like, I just experienced like almost every single bullet point on this list. And I just didn't know that that's what autism was. Like, it just feels like there's like this wall that just prevents me from like being able to connect with other people in the same way that I see other people are able to connect with each other. And it's always been there. If you saw this video where I talked a lot about my anxiety diagnosis, my severe anxiety, depression, all of that in my childhood, almost everything that I experienced and that I talked about in that video can be explained by autism. A lot of my anxiety, especially the social anxiety, is tied to masking my autism for so long. So many people being like, oh, everybody's autistic nowadays, everybody wants to be autistic, everybody doesn't want to be autistic, more people are just figuring out that they are. So it just rubbed me the wrong way when I would talk about things or like say that I was autistic, and people would be like, no you're not, or you didn't get diagnosed with it when you were a kid, or you don't do this, so no you're not. When it's like, I know how I live my life, and I know how I see the world and how I've seen it for 20 years of my life, you know, and I felt trapped, like I'm myself in this human body, but I'm not able to actually be myself in a way. And that's a feeling that I've had my entire life, and I'm thinking everybody feels that way, and as I grow up I'm realizing that everybody doesn't feel that way. Okay, let's get into the assessment. So the first thing, she asked me like interview questions, you know, where she was just, it was a whole bunch of questions. We were on there for like 4 hours, so it was a long assessment. But she asked me a bunch of questions, things that I go through, things that I experience. And I just wanted to add that the therapist that formally diagnosed me, I found her on therapyforblackgirls.com. So she was a Black woman, and she also had autism. She was very helpful. She was great in the entire experience. I didn't feel gaslit by anything, you know, it was an overall pretty pleasant experience. And this is the MIGDIS test, MIGDIS, I don't know. It's Ontario Interview Guidelines for Diagnosing the Autism Spectrum. The other assessments were all like self-done, so I just like went into the little thing and filled them out myself, and then all the results got sent to her, and then she like tells me what all of it means, you know? So for the first test, okay, so this test tests for 3 things. The first thing is sensory use and interests. So the 3 things under this first category are sensory seeking routines and their function, sensory sensitivities and triggers, body movements and mannerisms. And I have checks for all of those, being consistent with autism spectrum disorder. So yeah, I do STEM quite a bit. I just didn't know. I didn't know that what I was doing was STEMming, because I thought it, like I said, there's just not that much information put out about autism. So a lot of people think it looks a certain way, or that people will act a specific way, when that's just not the case at all. A lot of my stemmings, I've masked my autism so much, or like little things, like I have rings that I can like just play with like discreetly, kind of. A lot of times I'll do like, I like do this a lot, especially when I'm like walking somewhere and there's like a whole bunch of people. I'm always biting the inside of my lip like this, or like I pace around a lot. When I get excited, I do like a little like like yay, you know. I wiggle my toes like so often. It annoys my sister because I'll just be like sitting somewhere and my toes are just going. But there's just a lot of different things that I do that I just didn't know were stimming, but they are. So the second category for this test is language and communication. The 5 things are intonation and inflection, content of preferred topics, quality, clarity, and relevance of speech, reciprocity, and non-literal language and humor. The ones that I don't have are content of preferred topics. She explained a lot of this to me, but the reason why I don't have that one is because a lot of times, like, when I was younger and I would talk a lot, or I would, you know, ramble on about stuff that I was like interested in or whatever, I would be called annoying. I would be called, you know, I'd be told to shut up or whatever, you know, things like that. So a lot of it I've kind of internalized, and I'll have like the internal, like my special interest going on in my head, but I just won't talk to people about it just because I just feel like I'm being annoying, or I feel like, you know, nobody wants to hear about that, nobody cares. So yeah, it's part of the masking part. Intonation and inflection is basically like how I speak. So a lot of times people, like, a lot of times I come off as like monotone, or like I have no emotion, but then sometimes I'll come off as like I have a lot of emotion, you know. But I feel like for the most part I kind of speak in like the same like, you know. Social relationships and emotional responses. The ones I have checked are eye contact and eye gaze. I don't like eye contact very much. Like, the only people that I'll make like strong eye contact with is if I'm in love with you. That is the only time that I will look you straight into your eyes for like a long period of time while you're talking to me. Otherwise, I'll look at you, but then I'll look somewhere else, and I'll look at you, and then I'll, you know, look something, because it just feels so like it's just no. I don't have facial expressions and overall quality of emotional responses checked. I make a lot of facial expressions and I have a lot of emotional responses. I'm like overly emotional in a way, like I just have a lot of them, and I make a lot of facial expressions to make up for like how much I don't speak. So that's probably why that one's not checked. But the overall pattern for this MIGDES test is consistent with autism spectrum disorder. I have 9 out of 13 of these little boxes checked. The next test is the CFI test. CFI, I don't know. It is to test for overall level of executive function. I fell within the average range for this test, so my executive function skills apparently aren't that bad, but it feels like they are. Sometimes it's just like, it's just so hard for me to be able to do normal things, like things that feel normal to everybody else, like brushing your teeth, taking a shower, cleaning up a little bit, you know, like doing stuff that you know that you have to do, to like really amp my brain up to like, okay, let's do it, like we're gonna do it right now and we're gonna do it, you know. I shouldn't have to do all of that to brush my teeth, you know. That's that's one is like, what's going on here? So I do have some level of executive dysfunction, but apparently it's not that bad, so that's good, I guess. Next test is the SRS-2, which is the social responsiveness scale. For this test, I was scored between the moderate range. It says scores in this range indicate deficiencies in reciprocal social behavior that lead to substantial interference with everyday social interactions. These scores are typical for individuals with autism spectrum disorders of moderate severity. So basically, I have trouble in social interactions. We already knew that. If you watched that anxiety video, you already knew that. I always have trouble like knowing what to say to people, especially people that even people that I know well. Like anytime I'm having a conversation or I'm speaking to someone, I just never feel like I'm gonna say the right thing, even though I know there's not a right thing, but it feels like there is. It's like I'm constantly living in other people's heads, trying to figure out what I should say or like what to say, that I'm never really, not never, but I'm rarely ever living in my own head and just saying what I want to say. And it causes me to overthink so much of what I say in social situations, so much that I just end up not saying very much at all a lot of times. And I have trouble with being friends with people because, again, it's hard for me to be social, and to be friends you kind of need to be social at times, you know. Okay, this is just a sensory profile. I forgot where this part part of it came from, but apparently I have difficulty with low registration, sensory sensitivity, and sensation avoiding. So low registration is when you don't recognize or process all of the incoming sensory information, and then you don't compensate it by trying to gain more sensory input. So it may seem like I'm uninterested or inattentive to my surroundings, which happens very often. There are so many times where I'm in a conversation, especially at like dinner or something with like a big group of people, I will stare off into space, or I'll look at something else, or I'll be looking at the sky or looking at the trees, or like, you know, not really in everybody else's world, because I don't ever feel like I am in everybody else's world, to be honest. I always kind of feel like I'm in my own world, hence Tamari's world. For sensory sensitivity, there are things that I am like sensitive to, specifically like crushed velvet things. Like the feeling that just makes my like entire even the thought of it, just like touching like soggy food and like or it's like eating. There are so many times where I'm eating something, I'm like, oh, this is good, I'm enjoying this, and then I get to a point where I'm like, why does that feel like that in my mouth? Well, pause. But why does it feel like that? Like I start to feel indifferent towards the feeling now, and I'm like, I can't eat this anymore. Like I will literally feel like I'm about to throw up if I keep eating it, which is like crazy, because it's like you were just enjoying it so much, but it's like now you're absolutely sick of it. Also, like I feel like brushing your teeth and like getting in the shower, there are definitely things that are tied to sensory sensitivity as well, because brushing your teeth is like the toothpaste is such a strong sensation on your tongue. Like it's just a difference in sensations. It's like a transition. And when you're getting into the shower, it's like a transition from being all dry and fully clothed to being wet and cold in the shower. Or not cold, but you know, after you get out, you're gonna be wet and cold, and everything's gonna be sticking to your feet, and you're gonna be dripping water everywhere, and then you're gonna have to put on lotion, and then you're gonna have to do this, and you're gonna have to do that, and you're gonna have to get dressed again. It's like all of this, like can I get a break? For sensation avoiding, it's difficult for me to focus on one thing if I can hear the sound of something else, and like my brain is trying to register what that something else is sounding like while you're talking to me. It's like it's too much happening. And especially if there's like two people and they're both trying to talk to me at once, instead of like, I'm not gonna try to listen to you both, I'm not gonna listen to either one of y'all. speak one at a time, please. The next test is the RADS-R test, which I feel like is a very popular autism test. It is the VERYYY Autism Asperger Diagnostic Scale revised. The type of autism that I have, which is like level 1 autism with low support needs, what I have is what used to be considered Asperger's, but now it's just all under the autism spectrum, which some people feel certain different types of ways about it. I don't know how I feel about it, I just got here. But I do feel like it does kind of cause some sort of like disconnect, because people with Asperger's tend to present their autism in like with lower support needs, and it takes away from the people with autism that have more support needs, or that have more trouble with everyday activities that people with what was considered Asperger's don't have trouble with, you know? So it's making it seem like, oh, everybody, like anybody with autism can do this, or anybody with autism can do this, when it's like, that's not really the case. For this test, any score 65 plus indicates that you are likely autistic. What did I get? I got a 143. So I think the likelihood is very much there. Almost doubled the score, period. I'm a high scorer. Next test is the AQ, which tests for the presence of autistic traits. The higher the score, the more autistic traits you have. Any score over 26 indicates the presence of autistic traits. My score is a 30, so it's not too high over 26, but it's higher than 26. Next test is the CAT-Q test, which is to indicate how much you camouflage your autistic traits, which is what we've been talking about as masking. This test is very telling for people like me who are very high masking, who are able to appear to be, you know, neurotypical and like everybody else. A total score of 100 or above indicates that you mask your autistic traits. My score was 156. 156. The average neurotypical score is a 90. The average autistic score is a 124. So I passed the test with flying colors, babe. I got a 157. Got a 157. Did I say 156? I think I said 156 earlier. It's definitely 157. Anyways, high CAT-Q scores correlate with social anxiety in autistics, which is because of how much we mask. And it actually breaks it down to 3 subcategories: compensation, masking, and assimilation. So compensation means I've learned a lot of social cues from watching movies, skits on YouTube, or things like that, or books. Especially in books, it's a lot of teaching me how to interact with people and things like that. Masking, average autistic score 37, mine is 51. Assimilation, using strategies to try to fit in with others in social situations, like putting on an act or avoiding or forcing interactions with others. Definitely avoiding for me. Average autistic score is 44, mine is 51. So scored pretty high on this test. Next test is the DEVA-5 test. This test tests more for ADHD than it did for autism, and showed some attention and focus impairment, but it was better explained by the autism diagnosis than an ADHD diagnosis. Next part of it was a family collateral test. So the therapist that I talked to get the test, she had a session with my oldest sister where she asked like very similar questions to what I was asked her about how I was when I was a kid, things like that, to see like how the traits, you know, show up, and to get a different perspective from somebody else who has known me and seen me interact and, you know, live my everyday life. Okay, so my sister's answers were also checked against the SRS-2 test, which is that social responsiveness test from earlier. Her scores, the scores that she gave for me, indicate that she thinks that I have less problems with social interactions and with communicating than it appears that I do. So her scores showed that I was like better in social interactions than I scored myself, which just goes to show that like how much I mask it and how much of that is like internal things happening, because my sister thought I was doing so much better in like social interaction and thought I didn't have as many interferences with it as I do. So my sister just gave a whole bunch of information about me. I have historically emotionally shut down and go to my room when I'm upset. I try to meet more friends now, but historically I haven't had many one-on-one friendships. I've never had a one-on-one friendship ever in my life. I've always been in groups of friends, at least three of us, because there's a time where they can just talk and I can just like sit there and vibe, you know. I've had romantic relationships that I get very absorbed in, and I'm devastated when they end. I don't think she had to say all of that, but anyways. I have an aversion to hugging. I will allow a hug, but will not participate much. She said that I turn into a stick person when I get hugged. Like, I'll let people hug me, but then I'll just kind of like stand there with my arms to my side, which is very true. I don't really like being hugged, or people will hug you to greet you a lot. I don't really like that, because it's like, why are we touching? Like, this feels very intimate and I don't really like it right now. Generally, I'm not really a big hugger, but if I'm in love with someone, I want to be with them all the time. You know, I feel like I have just such a stark way that I treat somebody that I'm in a relationship with versus I treat everybody else. She said that I have 2 voices, one that's stern and one that's soft. I feel like the voice that I have now is the stern voice, but I've noticed that I do that, especially watching like my TikToks back and hearing how I talk. Like, sometimes I sound different, sometimes I sound, you know, like it's so interesting. She is hard to pull out of her activity. I'm helpful when I'm asked, but I don't want to stop what I'm doing, and I'll mope around first. Like, if I'm doing something and you're like, hey, can you come do this for me? I'm like, I'm like, fine. And that's a lot of what we were talking about in my little assessment that I had with the therapist is that a lot of times I'll not want to do stuff, or I'll not want to go somewhere, but I'll say that I want it, like I'll do it anyways just because they're asking me to, and not really consider how I feel about it. I like to go places by myself, but I know not everybody's like that, so I'll just end up going just because I feel like they want somebody to go. That's why they asked me to go, so I'm just gonna go because they want me to go, even if I don't want to go. So she said that I was a really funny baby. I would play pranks on people. Like when people would get up out of their seat, I would go and like steal their seat and like wait for them to come back and laugh whenever they came back. But anyways, all that being said, that goes into my diagnosis of autism spectrum disorder level 1, requiring some specific support. For me, being diagnosed with autism, it just made so many things in my life make sense, which is what so many people say when they're like a late diagnosed autistic person. It just makes so many things make sense. Like my entire life I felt like an alien. I felt weird. I felt dysfunctional. It's just so overwhelming and so exhausting to always be questioning yourself and questioning how you are and how you were made. You're trying to compare something that's not really comparable. I can't be like everybody else because I'm not everybody else, and I'm not like everybody else. I'm different, and that's beautiful, and that's okay. You know, I don't have to be like everybody else, but it was so affirming to me to be diagnosed with autism because it just tied so many different things in my life together, of things of why am I like this, and why does this happen to me? Why am I feeling this, experiencing this? And it just made so many things make sense. For the people out there that still don't believe me, or that think I'm making all of this up, or that I'm not really autistic, I'm just doing it for the attention, I really don't care. I just wanted the diagnosis just to have more peace of mind, just to know, and now I know I have autism. So yeah, that was it for this video. If you have any questions or anything that you want to talk about, feel free to talk about it in the comments. Anyways, thank you so much for watching this video. I love you all so much. I'll see y'all in the next one. Bye.